trees outlive most of us, so what I do now will either help or hinder folks 50, 75 years in the future. So we walk a balance. So we're managing trees that may not have been planted in the right place, but are still doing a lot of good.
Hey Raleigh, curious about how things really work in your capital city? We've got answers straight from the experts that make it happen. Welcome to Your City Answered. I'm Katie Dombrowski. Our question today comes to us from lifelong Raleigh resident Alex W. Alex wants to know, how does Raleigh plan on staying the city of Oaks while still expanding its developed land footprint? Let's head to Nash Square and sit down with tree guy and urban forester Zach Manor to talk about all things trees.
And that's a great question, one I hear fairly frequently. And like most things, the answer is complicated. But
yes,
what I would say is that the city of Raleigh has some limits on what it can require or ask for on private property. So our focus is to find locations where we can preserve and plant trees that falls outside of that property. So looking at city properties, looking at working with neighborhoods, community groups, and nonprofits to find places to plant trees after development has occurred. So working through ways to sort of find those planting spots.
Okay, so before we talk about everything we can do on city property, is there anything we can do about what happens on private property?
Sure. Private development is regulated by our Unified Development Ordinance. So our partners in planning and development, they're the folks that sort of manage the development process. Urban forestry is a matrix department, which means we do tree-related reviews and help part of that development review process. So that lays out what you can keep, what you can't keep, what you're required to plant for development in the city.
So then when it comes to city property and public property, how do we look at trees there, and how do we protect our trees in those spaces?
So one of the things we focus on is putting the right tree in the right place, right? So trees outlive most of us. So what I do now will either help or hinder folks 50, 75 years in the future. So we walk a balance. So we're managing trees that may not have been planted in the right place, but are still doing a lot of good. You've probably seen our 6-foot willow oaks and our 3-foot planting strips around town. So we're trying our best not to repeat that, get the right tree in the right place. And then we look for opportunities, parks, greenways. There are a lot of great opportunities for us to add some additional trees to help offset that loss we see in other places.
And thinking about trees, one thing I think we hear a lot about is about tree canopy. Can you talk about what tree canopy is and why it's important, and how you guys work to protect that or add more canopy to the city?
So canopy, the easiest way to describe it is it's the crown of the tree. So the part you see with leaves on it or pine needles. That canopy is what provides the shade, a lot of our photosynthesis, the carbon sequestration, the oxygen production. So the canopy is where a lot of the magic happens, right? So canopy is not an individual tree specifically, but many trees together. So as you look at a park, all the trees together add up to provide that canopy. And so canopy is typically measured in percentage. So during the canopy study that was completed for 2020, Raleigh was at right around 50% canopy. So that means 50% of Raleigh has some form of tree or leaf over the top of it.
I love walking around in the shade, so more canopy the better, I think. You know, and thinking about the question from Alex W., our resident, Raleigh's growing in a lot of different ways. Everybody wants to be here. It's the number one spot for all the things. We see a lot of development. We see trees get taken down either because they're in the way of where we're trying to build or go. So what are some things that we do, or how do we make sure that if somebody does have to take down a tree because they're building something, whether it be a developer or a resident, that how do we offset that? How do we make sure that if we're taking down a tree, that there's another tree to replace it in the future?
Well, so we do try in a lot of cases if it's the appropriate location. A lot of trees get removed, not just from the development itself, but trees could have issues themselves, health issues, their growth, the type of tree, thorns, things like that can cause issues if they're in the right of way or close to sidewalks, things like that. So it's a mix. We often don't get a one-for-one replacement, but planting a tree today in 25, 30 years will replace that offset. So we look for opportunities to plant in the right of way as part of development. There is tree conservation requirements for certain larger properties in the city when they develop, which retains trees on site. We also look to replant after development throws. So say you bought a new house, doesn't have any trees in the yard, you're a great candidate to plant a tree in your own yard. So sort of working between those ways to find places to plant. Trees are sort of like people, right? Some live a long time, some live a short time, some get big, some are small. So there's a lot of variety out there. What we find is to have a healthy urban forest, you need multiple species. So you need different kinds of trees. You also need trees that get different sizes. So you can't have all giant oak trees because there's lots of birds and flowers and things and bugs that like small trees. So it's sort of a mix. Like I said, it's sort of that balance. For the forest to remain healthy, you need a mix. You need some diversity of species and diversity of age. You really want to have that next tree available to take over the space when that big one has to come down for whatever reason.
Okay, so you mentioned you may not be able to do 1-for-1 with the tree. So then that means maybe where a tree got dug up, you don't put a tree back in that exact spot, but do you still put a tree in that area? Do you put it nearby, or does it go to the other side of Raleigh because we're all still in the city? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it depends. So I mentioned earlier sort of the right tree in the right place. There are a lot of wrong places that a tree shouldn't be, right? So a lot of the challenges you think of, damaged sidewalk, sight visibility, things like that are issues that we need to try to prevent. So when possible, we'll put it back in the same exact spot. If not, we'll try to put it somewhere close so we get a lot of benefit out of those trees amongst the big buildings.
And what does the city do with the trees? Like if we take down a big tree, you see a lot of people get upset about that. We love our trees in Raleigh. Do we save the wood? Does it just get chopped down and go away and turn into mulch? Like, do we use the mulch? Like, what happens to the trees that we do take down in the city?
Sure, it's all of the above, I would say. So in a lot of cases, we're only removing trees in the city perspective if they're dead, dying, diseased, or dangerous. So that tree has decay or rot or concerns. So what you can do with that tree is sort of variable. There's some oak species, maple species that can be used for other products, but only if that tree's in good shape. Mm-hmm. So typically by the time we're removing it, there isn't a lot of quality stuff left. So we've done everything from carvings that you'll see around parks in the city, Pullen Park, Moore Square, great examples of some trees. We've also worked with like urban wood gatherers. So trees at Dix Park were removed, were then refashioned into things they used to help build the Plaza Play. Mm-hmm. And then some do become mulch, some become logs, some become firewood. So it just kind of depends on the tree. So the city has a yard waste center, so we chip a lot of our branches, a lot of our wood. We then use that in our park properties through our city maintained facilities. And then there's the ability for citizens to go to yard waste and get some of that mulch for themselves as well.
So if you're a resident and you're worried about the trees and you're worried about the growth in the city, what would you say is the main takeaway that you would want our listeners to have when they think about those things and growth and protecting our natural resources?
So the city does a great job of trying to provide some opportunities for people to feel involved. So we're right in the middle of Reflecting Raleigh, which is our huge planning and development effort to create the new comprehensive plan for the city. So being involved in that, sharing your opinions, sharing your concerns with city staff, with your electeds is always a great path to go. We have lots of boards and commissions that are very interested in talking about trees and working through the process. Parks and other departments also provide lots of volunteer opportunities. So you could come plant a tree in a park or on a greenway. Lots of opportunities out there. I'm
curious, do you have a favorite tree?
Type of tree or favorite specific tree?
I didn't know that was a different question.
Sure.
So.
Well, I like cars, but I don't necessarily like all cars.
Okay,
right?
that's fair.
So it's
Thank
kind
you.
of
I didn't think about trees like that. So you already learned something new.
Sure. So my favorite tree species is the live oak. You find those a little more south from here and along the coast and stuff.
Are those the ones with the moss that hang down?
And they have the big sort of scaling out leaves.
Yeah, okay.
But my favorite actual tree in the city is in Roberts Park. There's a giant swamp white oak that's surrounded by tennis courts and basketball courts and tot lots. And so it's a perfect example of an urban tree. It's big, it's grown, it's surrounded by all of these activities and fun, and it gets to be sort of in the middle of it.
All right, you said Roberts Park, Southeast Raleigh.
That's
right.
All
right, we'll have to go look for Zach's favorite tree.
Yep.
What is something that people should be excited about when it comes to trees in Raleigh?
Well, as we talk about all this growth and we look for ways to sort of identify ways to help the canopy to plant more trees, working with the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board and a lot of concerned citizens, the city's embarked on a leaf out initiative. So that's a way to sort of set up ways to preserve, add to, and enhance Raleigh's canopy. And as I discussed previously, a lot of this has to do with sort of community outreach as well as city property. So we've come up with 7 key focus areas that we're looking at. So one of the big things is using native species. So native trees that are native to where you are often do better. They're used to the weather, they're used to the bugs, they're used to the squirrels. So looking for ways that we can use native species on city projects and stop using invasive species. We're working to help educate the community by creating a couple different plant lists that highlight some native plants that could either meet a development requirement or a backyard requirement. We're working on ways for city projects to have best practices. So if we need to build a park, or we need to build a fire station, are we planting? Are we preserving when we can? All those things still need to happen. We just need to find a good way for both to exist. So looking for opportunities. A couple of the other ones are, there's a pretty exciting initiative that people are starting to talk about, brought to us by our Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board and some concerned citizens. They're looking to start a campaign to plant 24,000 trees by 2032. So I think they call it a big audacious goal, and that's a pretty exciting piece of that. So
very cool.
Lots of things sort of happening with Leaf Out. We'll be presenting to council about that, and then more information to come. We're looking to update our website to provide more information and a place for people to go ask questions and get some answers.
Got a question you'd like us to dig into? We'd love to hear it. Visit raleighNC.gov and search podcast to submit your questions. Plus, catch every episode. Thanks for listening to Your City Answered, where your questions lead the conversation. Brought to you by the City of Raleigh.